we we are a week out from next gen consoles being in the hands of consumers. Big deal. Big deal. We've been talking about next gen now for it feels like 2 years. And I don't know if it's because it's been an actual 2 years or if it's simply because this year has felt like a lifetime packed into 11 months.
I think it's been about 2 years.
Yeah. I don't know.
Because it was E3 last year, right? Because this one got canceled.
Yeah, that's true.
This year is also a time warp, though.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. So I guess what we want to do, because there really was no story to like do a deep dive into. So I figured, we figured, it wasn't my idea, that no time like the present to kind of get our thoughts on next gen out there before we see next gen come to fruition. So let's start here. What are your purchasing plans for next gen as we go into next week? Cody, let's start with you.
I have pre-ordered both and expect them to arrive a few days late each. I think I'm the only one out of us that has pre-ordered, correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
So I'm obviously really looking forward to it. Even if like there's not much to play day one, it's still, this is the only thing, like the only piece of technology, the kind of only consumer item that I get excited about getting on day one, even with like all the inflated hype and kind of lack of things to do day one, I still get excited about it.
How about you, Larry? You got, well, I know you're not playing day one, but do you have plans for this gen?
Yeah, right now I'm still just maintaining the plan to jump full on into PC gaming, I think, especially with crossplay becoming more prevalent. Just a few years ago, we thought that would never happen.
Yeah.
And now I'm playing Apex with you on one console and another friend on another. So yeah, that's part of it. Part of it is just the lack of differentiation between Xbox's ecosystem and the PC ecosystem. Because I've just been an Xbox guy forever. I've never actually owned a PlayStation outside of one I inherited by marrying my wife who owned a PlayStation. So as far as like down the road, though, it depends on the day you ask me, to be honest. I feel like the Xbox is such a great deal. You can get so much with it. It's really accessible with the payment plan and getting Games Pass Ultimate thrown in, and I'm excited about the streaming stuff that Xbox is doing. But I also feel like PlayStation may still wind up having like the coolest single player story experiences, which there weren't a lot of this generation on Xbox. So I'm gonna wait and see. I think I am going to wind up buying one eventually, but I'm gonna kind of watch and see what happens at launch and how other people are feeling and get some thoughts.
Yeah, and if you're hanging out with us in chat, feel free also to tell us what you're planning on doing. I did not pre-order, mostly because I'm just kind of over the whole like waiting in line, even a digital line, and like the frustration of not being able to get something. Like I'd much rather just wait. And plus, like our current situation right now, like we're living in somebody else's house. This room that you see behind us with this messy bed, like this is the space that we have. My desk, like every square inch of my desk is currently covered. I have nowhere to plug up new consoles. So it's like my PlayStation 4 and Xbox are in this drawer back here. Like, I just don't have the space to do it right now. We actually just signed on to a new apartment though, 2 weeks ago. So we'll be moving it right at the beginning of the year when we get back for Christmas. And I was like, after Christmas, the availability of these things was probably going to be a little like easier to obtain. And so, and then I'll have the space, can kind of take it all in. At that point, like there's going to be a couple months of experiences coming out. Not that we're going to see like a tremendous uptick in what we can do on these consoles then, but I'm just taking it slow, easing my way into it, which is not normal for me. This is unprecedented territory, guys, because I am such a sucker for new technology, but I'm looking forward to it. And I guess as we're going in, like I want to start with this and be thinking about like predictions that you have for this generation, because that's definitely something that I want us to get to here in a bit. But I want to start here. Like, what are the things that you're really excited about? Maybe it's like a feature, like certain features or strategy decisions, or even if it's games, things like that. What are the things you're excited about going into this generation, and what are the things that you're like not necessarily hesitant about, but like kind of interested to see how they evolve as we go through?
What I am most excited about is actually the streaming future. Last week we talked about a big story where Phil Spencer had said that the future of Xbox included really affordable hardware options. An idea has been floated, like basically the Amazon Fire Stick of gaming. You just plug this thing into the TV and you're ready to play. I just think that's awesome. Luke, when you and I were younger, gaming was a lot more niche. It was a lot less cool. These days, you're going to get made fun of by older men if you play video games, but outside of that, it's a much more acceptable thing to do. And I think it's really cool that the technology is evolving to a place where it's not just acceptable, but it is accessible. Like we're getting to a point where anybody is going to be able to play regardless of their income level. There may be differences in the graphics and that kind of thing, but I just think it's really awesome how easy it's going to be to get into gaming. If I wound up buying a PlayStation, I could still buy the little Xbox stick down the road, hopefully, and have the full experience of games, even if I'm not getting them at the highest quality. I'm really excited about that.
I'll give you something for each console. And this is mostly features driven, I guess, or systems driven, but for both of them, and this is like one of the only things that outlets have been able to talk about since they've gotten their hands on them, but it's the load times, which for PC is not like, if you have a high-end PC, this is something you're used to already, but like just in terms of a quality of life improvement, faster load times is something that I will always welcome. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, like in terms of how it impacts like backwards compatible games. But like being able to not wait 2 minutes for Red Dead Redemption 2 to load will be nice. And then obviously the games that come out on PS5 and like kind of take full advantage of it will be nice as well. One thing for PlayStation that I'm both, I guess, intrigued by and excited about hesitantly is the thing, I think it's called adaptive triggers, that they've talked about kind of in their press materials, which for people who don't know is like the triggers can, based on what input you're putting into it, like what action you're doing in the game, the triggers will kind of require different amounts of pressure to press down all the way, or they won't press down all the way at all. So think about like if when you're pressing a bow back, like tension, you'll feel the tension in the trigger because you'll have to pull down kind of harder as you get towards the zenith of that pull. Or a gun can jam and you actually won't be able to pull down the trigger. You'll have to do an action to kind of do it. Sort of like controller driven, like active reload, kind of in Gears of War. I'm excited about it because I can already see like the potential for that in making games more immersive. But I'm hesitantly excited about it because I think it will only become not a gimmick if Sony supports it and like actually encourages developers to take advantage of it, not just their first party developers. Like the speaker in the PS4 controller is a great example of a feature that I'm sure they thought would like really take off, but really only ended up getting used in, I think the last game I remember having it on in was Horizon Zero Dawn, but I just turned it off because it was really off-putting. And maybe
wait, you don't want like this little 75-cent speaker talking to you in the middle of your games?
No, like every time I was too immersed, I think was the problem.
Dude, so another game that uses that feature is the MLB games. And so like that's where your all of your umpire chatter comes from, and it's like the first thing I would go and turn off.
Yeah, 100%.
But the touchpad's another really good example of that too. Like they
Yeah.
thought that the touchpad was going to be something, and it just became a giant ass map button in the center of the controller.
Sure, yeah, it became the equivalent of the Xbox Select or back button or whatever.
Yeah.
But I hope that that feature carries on. It's not just kind of a gimmick out of the box, which I could easily see it becoming if they don't support developers or encourage developers to use it. But I see potential in that feature, especially for a genre I am not remotely interested in or have ever really invested in. But like driving games, I could see really using that in terms of acceleration.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's cool. And then for Xbox, I'm just excited about all of this is like small piddly diddly stuff because it's like we haven't really gotten a sense of what the next generation of games will be. But that just the quick resume thing, which again is something that you can kind of do on PC, but I haven't been able to really do on console before. So that'll be just another kind of nice improvement on what it's like to play games on a daily basis.
Yeah. To your earlier point of the load times, I think it makes sense to just talk about this here because it's going to be a weird stand on its own story later. If it's okay with you guys that I bring it up.
Do it.
But there was an article from GameSpot this week by James O'Connor. The new Xbox console loads The Witcher 3's environments very, very quickly. And basically you can go and watch this streamer Rubhin925. he played about 2 hours of the game, but this article has a gif of when he fast traveled in The Witcher, and it's just insane. He clicks on the map and there's like a graphical pop that looks like the game's glitched out for just a second, and then he's there, and that's just crazy. Like just go watch a Witcher stream, watch how long it takes to fast travel, and then watch this gif. And I don't know, for me, like we've been hearing about how fast these load times are and how there are no load screens, and that's exciting. But for me, like finally seeing it happen, I'm like, that is crazy.
Wait, so,
I don't know when I'll look at Twitter on my phone.
Well, I was going to ask, when am I going to get tips that say like standing in the dragon fire will deal increased damage over time?
Yeah, tool tips are a thing of the past.
No, the load time stuff is definitely really interesting to me. I'm interested in how far people are going to be how much people are going to be able to get out of their SSDs before having to look to expand their options. Because I think here in the beginning, like these games won't be incredibly massive, but I don't think it's going to take long for us to start seeing like huge games. And some of the proprietary pricing of some of the memory for like Xbox, while it's on par with similar like third-party SSDs, it's total sticker shock for people who are used to like being able to stroll up into GameStop, buy a $70 external hard drive, and get their stuff. You know, now they're paying $300 for $300 for a comparable hard drive that's able to do all of these same things that the built-in hard drive for the Xbox is going to be able to do. But you know, when we look back at some of the the one that comes to my mind is just like with the Vita and how their proprietary memory stuff really was a big hurdle for people that were looking to expand what they were able to do on their console. I think that we're just going to start to see these SSDs filling up really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, and we can bring another story up here, but there was a leak that came out over the last week that, and this is not remotely surprising, but suggests that like it gives you a better sense of kind of how much space you will actually have free on on PS5, which is probably a little over 650 gigabytes according to some leaks. And the console, they've said, ships with around 825 gigs, and obviously the difference there is taken up by the operating system.
3D platformer.
And the Xbox, I think, ships with a terabyte, and about 800 of that is free. And yeah, like Warzone or Call of Duty takes up an eighth of that alone.
Mhm.
More than an eighth of that. I think now it's around like 150 gigabytes. And so I think people should probably just plan to, like, as soon as they can, buy additional storage, because you're going to need it sooner than you think.
And, you know, given the current size of Call of Duty, you should just assume that the next one's going to take its own hard drive. So just buy a couple extra for Call of Duty.
The other things I'm kind of looking at in launch, and these are just more like general things and not necessarily specific. But in this COVID world that we're in, I'm really interested in what, first of all, like, product availability is going to be like over the first few months. Like, are we going to see massive shortages of these systems because of just like logistics reasons?
Yeah.
But I'm also interested in, like, how does the impact of less physical retail, like, how is that going to be felt across all this? So thinking about like Black Friday is not going to be a physical event. No retailer is going to be dumb enough, even if their stores are open, like Target, Walmart, that kind of stuff. I don't think any of those stores are going to be dumb enough to say, like, all right, here's our physical in-person Black Friday event. And a lot of console sales still happen in retail, especially to gift givers who aren't necessarily like going on Amazon and looking for this sort of stuff. So I'm interested to see, just like, first of all, what are the platform holders' forecasts for these systems, but like also how are those forecasts gonna be met? The other thing I'm always interested in at any console launch is just like, oh man, what are the hardware issues that are going to be going, you know? And we've already gotten some like talk about some weird overheating stuff with some of the Xbox. I think it's been with the Xbox Series X. You were mentioning like all of the bells and whistles in the DualShock. What are they calling it? DualShock this time? It's
DualSense.
Yeah, the new DualSense controller. Like, I worry anytime you're adding like these little physical elements in, like, what's the shelf life of those things? How well do they hold up? Especially like in the triggers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you get a 12-year-old playing Call of Duty, they're gonna break that thing so fast if it's not built well.
And that's been like a problem this generation. I and several of my friends have had Xbox controllers wear out so quickly compared, like, prior to this generation, controllers only broke when like stupid stuff happened or you threw it across the room. Not that I've ever. But this generation, like, I've had to buy new controllers so many times. And then Nintendo had an issue with, like, they had a new sort of controller and it didn't hold up, and they never actually managed to fix it so far. So when I hear those features, I am like, that's cool, but is it going to break more?
Yeah. Well, we got to remember how bad the original Xbox One controllers were.
I still have mine,
and they're bad.
It works. Yeah, I haven't had any issues with it.
Like, and it wasn't just bad from like a wear and tear standpoint. Like, they just didn't feel good. They felt real loose. There was no real like pressure given back to you on like the triggers and stuff. The bumpers were so clicky. I remember that. Like, so it's always, I like to see those like little quirks, you know, that get ironed out over time. And I think we'll get some of those. Do you guys have any like predictions for this gen? Whether that's who's going to sell more units. I don't know if we even like really give a shit about that. Like, where we're going to end up at the end of this. Is this the last console generation? Like, any predictions on that stuff?
So I think by the end of it, PlayStation will sell more units, and it won't matter because Xbox doesn't care. Like, their strategy really seems to be to get their game service onto as many platforms as they can. It doesn't really seem to be about selling Xboxes necessarily. Here at the beginning, sure, that's going to be really important, but as the generation goes on, I think it's going to be less important to Xbox. And to that point, I feel like it's this whole idea of the console wars. I think that's just kind of coming to a close because Xbox and PlayStation are playing completely different games this time around. So I expect to see that die down a lot. I don't think you're going to see as many fanboys of one or the other. I think you're going to see more people willing to play in both ecosystems, especially with Xbox making theirs so accessible.
Look at Mr. fucking Optimism over here on the right-hand side of your screen, ladies and gentlemen. The console wars are over. Pack it up.
Console wars are over.
You can go see your wife and kids, wow. That's a bold prediction, Larry, because I'm just not seeing it in the comment section of literally anything that we're posting at Modus.
No, I mean, I don't think it's over yet, but I think we're going to get there.
Hey.
I don't see that.
I want to see world peace.
Yeah, I don't see that dying down anytime soon. I think people are too invested in these
brands that don't care about them.
Brands that literally only care about them as much as they can throw money at them. But I mean, ultimately, I think the single biggest success coming out of this generation will be Game Pass. I think it'll be the biggest exclusive, like, it's not a game, but it's an exclusive feature to their ecosystem. I think I think they've already projected that PS5 is probably going to outsell the Series X at launch. Whether or not it'll outsell combined, the S and the X is a different story, and I'll be interested to see how that plays out over the kind of the launch period. But I just think, I guess my prediction is that games are going to hopefully, I'm going to kind of figure out how to phrase this. I was going to say there's going to be a reckoning, but I don't think that that's going to be completely the case. And by reckoning, I mean in terms of the way games are made and kind of what we've been talking about over the past few weeks with crunch and with kind of labor practices and ethical practices at developers. I don't even think that's specifically a next-gen thing. I think it's just a timing thing in terms of when these are coming out and how the conversation is shifting. But more broadly, I am curious and I am hopeful about how the advancements in this generation on a technical level will inform design decisions. And so in that way, I think we'll see some more. I hope to see a little bit more creativity in terms of the AAA space, because I think it's become pretty stale towards the tail end of this generation. Like, as much as I love The Last of Us Part 2, and as much as I admire it for a lot of the things it does, that is like stereotypical AAA. It hits a lot of the beats that we've come to expect from that kind of game and Sony's brand of prestige titles. And so I hoped and this is perhaps coming from the Xbox side, but I hope to see kind of more like middling, like mid-budget, mid-scale games kind of come to the fore. And while I don't necessarily think that will be true right off the bat, I think based on the kind of studios Microsoft is at least supporting, we'll see it coming out of their side. Maybe not from the third party and independent side, but at least from Microsoft's side, I think that'll be nice to see.
Well, I think that a service like Game Pass gives that a space to exist in. Like,
there's funding for it. Yeah.
Well, there's funding for it, and there's also a player base for it. And like, if I can get this game on Game Pass, I'm going to automatically get in front of hundreds of thousands of users.
Yep.
And so the risk starts to come down. I'm obviously interested in Xbox's strategy moving forward. I think like both of you have kind of hinted at, like, talking about units sold, even if we were to care that much about that kind of stuff, it's going to become an impossible conversation to have around like what's included, especially if Xbox starts getting into streaming sticks, or, you know, there's more people who are like, oh, the feature set of playing like xCloud on my phone is there, and like that's just kind of where I play at this moment. Like, it's just gonna be hard to tell.
in 7 years when you can just play xCloud on the hologram that shoots out of your smartwatch.
Yeah. I just think we're gonna get a lot more, like, the thing that's gonna be, I think we're gonna get a lot more conversation around like monthly active player base and things like that. Things like are the data sets that we kind of talk over as just like talking heads in the industry are gonna be much more akin to like Netflix, like total audience or total streaming hours, things like that. Those are the things that we're going to start to talk about more. I do think that with PlayStation, and we've talked about this in the past as well, just like the importance of creating more diversity within their library of exclusives. Like, you have a lot of great over-the-shoulder third-person action games about dads.
Yeah.
But like, I want to see PlayStation, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be Killzone, but like, where's the first person shooter? Where are the PlayStation platformers? Where are the PlayStation RPGs? Where, like, Sony, I think if they're really gonna like double down, which is what it appears they're doing, on we have awesome exclusives and this is the place that gamers want to fucking play, like, I'm gonna need more than just like God of War, The Last of Us, Horizon Zero Dawn, Uncharted, like, all those games are great, but they're also all very, very samey. So
yeah,
I'm interested to see what the next big IP out of Sony is. And coming from a studio that we haven't seen much from, like, obviously, I would imagine that Naughty Dog creates something new next generation just because of where their cycle is at. But like, I really do want to see something new. That's what's exciting about a next generation, is the idea of seeing something new. And right now, most of what I'm seeing and what I'm excited for isn't necessarily exclusive to Microsoft, but will at least be on Game Pass day and date. And I can certainly find a better diversity of experiences there. So
yeah, back to your thing on like game design too. Like, I'm curious if the play is going to be like, oh, we need more sprawling worlds, longer hours of playtime, more side quests, more cutscenes. Like, oh man, we need a 500-hour RPG where it's like a 500-hour storyline. Like, I'm exaggerating to a point here, but like, I think there's a tendency when new hardware becomes available to just like totally bloat experiences out. And I just think there's more interesting ways to leverage the incredible load times, the amazing things that you can do with textures and photorealism and that kind of stuff. And like, I don't think the answer for Sony or any studio or any game maker is going to be like, oh, look at this 300-hour fucking RPG that we're about to create in this map that's as big as the United States of America and you can walk across it. Like, but I also don't trust a lot of game makers to use constraint and make really tight experiences, right? Like, I think we're gonna see, especially in the AAA space, a lot of just like, it's the biggest this ever, it's the longest this ever, it's the most this ever, and it's like, that's not necessarily what this generation needs to be all about.
But I do think down the road someone's going to get creative with what they can do with the technology, and I think it's weird to say this because of how bloated the market is with this right now, but I think battle royales are a great example of this. Battle royales could not have existed last generation. Just the technology to drop that many players onto a map of that size at the same time, just, it wasn't there. And no one thought of that idea until several years into this generation. So I anticipate that we'll start seeing like, we'll see some sort of thing that's just like a completely different way to play. But I think that you're right. Out of the gates, everyone's going to be like, this can do the same thing, but way more powerfully. Let's make the map giant. Let's make the players in the battle royale double. It'll just be the same thing done bigger. but eventually we'll get there. We'll see something neat.
Yeah. And just think about the small ways that some of that tech impacts design. Like I was thinking about this the other day. Think about all the hidden load screens that occur in games, like elevator rides, or like in Naughty Dog games are infamous for this, like shimmying through a wall. That's a load screen.
Mhm.
They're loading the next environment. How does that impact? How does the fact that that is no longer a barrier kind of impact the development and design process of a game? It's a small thing, but it impacts the way you interact with the world and the way you navigate a world in perhaps interesting ways.
I now teleport to the second floor. Fuck elevators.
Like they
We're only
showed
running
that,
escalators now.
Yeah, there we go.
they showed the footage of Demon Souls, and while that's a game I will probably pick up at some point, like sitting at a bonfire and then like zip you're to the next place, like that's amazing. And like while it's not it hasn't, those games aren't infamous for like long load time, long like periodic load times. There's one initial load and then you're kind of in the world. It's cool. Like and I would like to see game makers get more creative with how you can navigate worlds, because like that, I mean, that's something I'm excited about. I guess the speed at which you can move through a world is exciting to me. I think they had shown something about that when they were teasing Spider-Man for like this next generation, and how you could potentially like move at so much more quickly than you could even before, and how that affects like not only how you move but like the world design, because you can move so much faster, you can move so much farther, so the world by default kind of has to be a little bit larger, or at least designed differently to present barriers to you. So
Yeah,
lots of cool stuff and lots of cool challenges I think people will puzzle out over the next few years.
that's why they had to remove the pilot jump kit from Apex. So in Titanfall, you've got this jump kit that lets you run up walls and on walls, and it was just too easy to traverse the map. So they had to slow the player down because the map wasn't big enough. So in Red Dead, your horse will go like 8 miles an hour instead of 5 miles an hour. It's going to be wild.
It's a big upgrade. You're going to be riding around jalopies.
Cody's going to hate it, but Luke's going to love it.
I'll love it. Let's turn off all those notifications because that was loud. Any parting thoughts on next gen before we move on?
No, hopefully I'll have a little time to be able to talk about at least the Xbox next week if it arrives on time.
I do have one sort of silly question, but but I am seriously asking. Do you think this next generation will see any serious VR or AR, or is it still just it's a gimmick and we'll try it periodically and never seriously support it?
It is funny, but I don't think PlayStation's been talking very much about like PlayStation VR in this generation. I just think people are I think it's one of those things like that technology needs to progress even farther and get even cheaper for it to ever be mainstream. Like,
yeah,
people just don't want a bunch of fucking wires coming off of their body, and they don't want to have like a whole dedicated space for that shit. Like, I'm speaking for myself, but also at large, I think it's just kind of the case. But in AR, I think there's just a lot more focus with AR on its other applications at the moment. Like, it's not necessarily like a game technology because of what would be required to pull that off well. Like, HoloLens was the only hint we ever got of AR coming to the gaming space, and it's not been heard from in that context in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, do you think that's going to launch before this generation's over?
Yeah. Well,
Are we finally going to get that Minecraft game?
Yeah. I'll be building fucking Minecraft huts on my coffee table this Christmas. Yeah, I don't know. That's just my thought on it. At least is like I just think I don't think it's there yet.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
I'll just tag on to Luke and say I think the future of both VR and AR is elsewhere. I don't think it's in gaming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think we'll see VR in gaming for many years again, but I am curious about once xCloud's in full force, if we'll see some sort of AR flare up there. But this generation, I still think you're right. As far as the gaming tech goes, it's just not convenient enough.
Mm-hmm.
And everything's pushing toward more convenient, not less convenient.